Hello guys, thank you for joining us again. I'm Nunnally, and we are in the middle of a series, a three-part series, and we're in part 2, where we're tracing the journey of Joseph and Mary from Nazareth to Bethlehem, and we're trying to recreate the conversations that would have taken place as they're passing by majorly important biblical locations where important events take place in the history of redemption, God working with His people. Last time, in part 1, we went down off the Nazareth Ridge through the Jezreel Valley, and we talked about Mount Tabor, the Spring of Gideon, and the Valley of Dothan. If you missed that session, please go back and take a look at that as soon as you have an opportunity. It'll catch you up on our journey. But today we're going to look at their journey through the central part of Israel, what is called in the Bible Samaria, from here to about here. And we're going to be looking at the very important biblical sites of Shechem, Shiloh, and Bethel as Joseph and Mary pass by them, and noting the points of biblical importance in each location. You'll remember in session 1 that we talked about this passage, Deuteronomy chapter 6, framing the discussion as Mary and Joseph, observant Jews, are walking on their journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem. In the law of Moses, it says, "These words that I'm commanding you today will be on your heart. Teach them diligently to your children, and talk of them when you sit in the house and when you walk in the way." So biblical journeys are going to give opportunity for people in Bible times to revisit important narratives in the Bible associated with the places where they're traveling. One of those places is Shechem, a very important biblical location that's associated with the biblical figure of Abraham, the father of the Hebrew and Jewish race, and Joshua, the one who brought the people of Israel into the land of Canaan and subdued it and settled it. We're looking there at the themes of the presence of God and covenant renewal, both really important themes that we started to develop in session 1. And these are going to inform and encourage the faith of people like Joseph and Mary as they're getting ready to step into the history of redemption themselves and to move it on to a whole new height in terms of the presence of God, God with us, Emmanuel, and in terms of a renewed covenant, the new covenant. So let's take a look at this particular location. The city of Shechem, it's in the tribal allotment of Manasseh. Samaria in the New Testament, today it is referred to as the West Bank. There it says, "The Lord appeared to Abram." His name hadn't even been changed, but God is appearing to him. There's the presence of God with people, with His creation. And He said, "To your descendants I'll give this land." And so Abram built an altar there. It's the first altar that is built to Yahweh in the land of Canaan that would eventually be renamed the land of Israel. He built an altar there at Shechem to Yahweh who had appeared to him. Here's another important biblical event. At the end of the book of Joshua, it says that Joshua made a covenant. This is covenant keeping. He's brokering a covenant between God and His people that day, and it took place in Shechem. He set up a large stone as a memorial, a reminder of this contract that was brokered between God and His people, and it was by the sanctuary of Yahweh. So there in Shechem, it had become a holy site, not just to the Canaanites, but now to the Israelites. This covenant renewal, not just Mount Sinai, but now an update, a new download from God to His people. This reminds us of this promise that the prophet Jeremiah would speak about. Jeremiah says God is going to make a new covenant, and He's going to write it on their heart this time, not just on tablets of stone. So a whole new upgrade, and this sets the stage for the new covenant that we find coming with the incarnation, the appearance of Jesus on the scene of human history. So let's take a look at a video of the city, the ancient city of Shechem. We're flying over top of the early Bronze Age walls. This is the Canaanite sanctuary here where they worshiped. And it seems that Israel destroyed it and then just kind of took over that location. Here's the stone that archaeologists identify as being the stone that Joshua set up and then wrote on it the words of the Torah, the law. We're going to eventually, in just a moment, pan to the right, to the south, and we'll be looking at Mount Gerizim that forms the southern edge of the city of Shechem. Here we go at Mount Gerizim. This is where the Samaritan temple was built, the one that's being referred to by the woman at the well in Samaria in John chapter 4. And then we're going to begin to pan first to the west and then eventually look north at Mount Ebal. Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim is the place of the blessing of the law, and in Deuteronomy chapters 27 and 28, here's the valley that separates them in the modern day city of Nablus. And now we're going up the slope of Mount Ebal. Ebal is the valley, is the mountain of the curse in Deuteronomy 27 and 28. And there it says that Joshua built an altar to Yahweh, right there on Mount Ebal, the God of Israel on Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded. He built it of uncut stones and then coated them with lime, according to another text, Deuteronomy 27. And there they offered burnt offerings on it to the Lord. This is a picture of that excavated Mount Ebal, found in the 1970s by Adam Zertal, excavated in the 80s, and then again most recently by Scott Stripling. And here we find an altar built of uncut stones, an altar that has plaster below the ground, an altar that it has sacrificial pits all around it, where the leftovers of animal sacrifice, all of kosher animals, acceptable for sacrifice according to the law of Moses, and the remains of those animals are buried in these sacred pits to preserve their sanctity, having once been consecrated to the Lord. All of these bones have been analyzed by the Department of Zoology at the Hebrew University, and these have been determined to be animals fit for sacrifice. This is evidently the altar of Joshua, built by the Israelites at the time when they're first coming into the land of Israel to conquer it. This is going to remind Joseph and Mary of covenant renewal and the presence of God. And they're getting ready to step into that part of the story where they're going to see the covenant renewed yet again through their Son. And they're also going to see in Jesus the presence of God among His people. This is the kind of thing that would inform and encourage their faith. The next location that we're going to look at, clearly passed by on the left, on the east, by Joseph and Mary, is the location of Shiloh. Shiloh is the place where the tabernacle was set up and the presence of God dwelt long before the temple was ever built. And the tabernacle was at Shiloh for over 360 years. Here at Shiloh, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump down the road from Shechem. Here at Shiloh, off the east side or the left side of the road, as Joseph and Mary are traveling by, we have all kinds of biblical events associated with the town of Shiloh. One, for example, back to Joshua, says the whole congregation assembled at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting, the tabernacle, there. So again, this marked the spot as the place that God chose to especially manifest His presence among His people. And there's nothing more encouraging than the presence of God. In fact, it's the one component of all the covenant renewals that we read about in the Hebrew Bible and on into the New Testament that is constant. God promises to dwell among us. He's not a distant God. He's not a disconnected God. He's a very much involved God with His people and with His creation. In the book of Judges, we hear about the house of God was at Shiloh. So all of this is before Solomon built the first temple or Ezra, Nehemiah, etc. built the second temple in Jerusalem. In 1 Samuel chapter 3, we hear about the Lord revealing Himself to Samuel at Shiloh. So people like the high priest Eli and then the high priest / prophet Samuel, these events are taking place, these narratives are happening at Shiloh. We even hear about Shiloh from much later from the prophet Jeremiah. He says, "Remember my place that was in Shiloh, where I made my name to dwell at the first," because eventually that sacred place, the place for proper worship, was relocated to Jerusalem after David conquered it and Solomon built the temple. So let's take a look at the city of, or at the place where the tabernacle was set up in Shiloh. We have a video here, beautiful video, with the hill country of Ephraim all around Shiloh. And this rectangle here, that is 75 feet by 150 feet, matches perfectly the dimensions of the tabernacle as it's described in the book of Exodus 3 different times. The rest of the tell or occupation is the city, the village, the town of Shiloh. But the most important part is right here on the north side. By the way, in Jerusalem, the temple was built on the north side of the city. And so on the north side here, we get the tabernacle set up in the days of Joshua and continuing on for over 360 years here. The presence of God, again, an important component, a theme that continues to crop up in this journey of Mary and Joseph from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Now let's move to the next major spot in the road, and that's Bethel. It's the Arabic Beit-in preserves the original place name given by the Israelites in the Hebrew Bible to this location, Bethel. It means Beth, like Bethlehem. Beth means place or house of. And the word El is a common word like Elohim. It's a common word for God. So Bethel means the house or the place of God. And we have narratives from the life of Abraham as well as his grandson Jacob, both among the patriarchs of the Hebrew people. And again, at Bethel, we get this theme of the presence of God because it's named Beit El, Bethel, because it is the place where God reveals or revealed Himself. Our passages for that are Genesis 12 for Abraham and Genesis 28 for Jacob. Here on our satellite map, we've moved from Nazareth through the Jezreel Valley, on through the tribal allotment of Manasseh, and we have gone past the city of Shechem and Shiloh, and now we are at the city of Bethel, Beit El, the place or house of God. In Genesis 12, we're told Abraham proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west, Ai on the east, and there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. So as far back as Abraham, this place is connected to the presence of God and God meeting with human beings. There he built an altar. This is the second altar. Shechem is the first, and then Bethel is the second. Also in Genesis 28, we hear this story from the life of Abraham's grandson Jacob. Jacob had a dream, and behold, a ladder was set on the earth, with its top reaching into the heavens, and behold, angels were ascending and descending upon it. And behold, Yahweh stood above it and said, Yahweh is again revealing Himself. He is appearing. He is making His presence known to His people. And He's renewing that promise, the promise of covenant, with yet another generation, with the generation of Jacob. He says there, behold, I am with you. Notice that emphasis again on the presence of God. Jacob awoke from his sleep and this is his response. Surely Yahweh is in this place. He's revealed Himself. He has taken up His position in time and space with human beings. He has invaded yet again human history. This is none other, he says, than the house of God or the place of God, Bethel. And this is the gate of heaven. And he called the name of that place Bethel, the place or house of God. Here's a picture of it. We don't have a ton of imagery on Bethel simply because it is technically in the West Bank these days. But this is that Arab village Beit-En that marks the location of Bethel, a beautiful place in the hill country of Ephraim that the Bible speaks about. Now, let's just do some road trip reminders on this segment, this middle segment, part 2, session 2 of Joseph and Mary's steps of faith, their journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem. And one of those really important recurring themes in this entire journey, this segment included, is the promise of the presence of God. It's incredible that we get this so frequently in the Bible. It's as though God is trying to drill this into the minds of human beings. I created you for fellowship with me, and I have promised and I will fulfill this guarantee, this covenant to stay with you, remain with you, to be with you always, even unto the ends of the earth. And this covenant is yet again renewed in Jesus, who Himself became Emmanuel, God with us. God is with us. As we read in Matthew chapter 1, verse 22, all this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. This is about prophetic, this is about promise fulfillment, saying, behold, the virgin will be with child, she'll bear a son, and they will call His name Emmanuel. With us is God. Another road trip reminder is that God is a covenant-making, and by the way, yes, covenant-keeping God. Even into the modern day, He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. This God promises, and He keeps His promises. He gives His word, and He does not back up from it. He didn't in the Hebrew Bible. He didn't between the Testaments. He didn't give up on His word. He didn't void His word in New Testament times because He renewed that covenant and pressed it even further into realization in Jesus as Emmanuel. He is a covenant-keeping God, and He is the same today as well, the same yesterday, today, and forever. He promised that He would renew that covenant. Jeremiah, remember the passage in 31:31, I'm going to make a new covenant, and every time He renews His covenant, it gets just a little bit better. It gets a little bit more of an upgrade, all the way to the point of God with us in the person of Jesus. I hope that this second segment, this middle segment, where we've gone through the central part of the land of Israel, the Manasseh and Ephraim, the Samaria, the West Bank part of Israel, I hope that this has helped set the stage for you and your celebration of the end of this most important journey to the most important birth that ever took place, because I'm certain that it prepared and encouraged the faith of the biblical figures. Joseph and Mary got their hearts ready to receive this new level of realization of God dwelling among us. And may that encourage your hearts as you serve Him, as you serve those around you this coming Christmas. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. We'll see you again really soon on session number 3. God bless.